All right. Well, do you got any questions for us? Because we might be on a time limit here.
Well, actually, we already have plenty.
Good.
So yeah, first, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us. I'm so amazing. I was watching a bunch of the streams. Everyone's so awesome, and I wish I finished all my Spanish courses, but then I didn't. So, I got 1 or 2 words.
Yeah, so usually it was fine, but probably on Saturday you guys will have a bad time because everything is in Spanish there. We'll see working on translations, but it might not work.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. So how do we proceed? How do we go here?
Well, we have some questions for you, but we invite the people also to participate and send some questions in the chat. But I have one question here for you. That during yesterday's keynote, David asked why the keynote wasn't in Spanish. So the first question is, how much Spanish do you know?
How much Spanish do I know, or how much Spanish does Maddy know?
I think all of the above. I actually took Latin through most of my high school, but I do know my numbers in Spanish, and I know my days of the week because of a song, because I took it in kindergarten and first grade. So really not as much as I should. I was reading the slide deck, the template, and a lot of that was in Spanish. So I was able to figure it out. I was like, oh, nombre, name. I know that. But if I hear it, I have no idea what's going on. I am very traditionally American, speak English, and that's it. So
An American English. What about you, David? Do you know any
Spanish? So I did take a little bit of Spanish in high school, or no, I guess it was junior high school. And so all of my kids take Spanish classes. However, my main language was German, which is very different. So yeah, it's not very, Spanish isn't foreign to my ear. I can pick up a fair amount, but I would never be conversational without really immersing myself in a culture. And the problem that we have as English speakers is everybody just kind of defaults to English for everything, which makes it really hard for an English speaker to master another language because the expectation is just never there. So even when I've traveled to Europe or anywhere else, I'm like, hey, I want to learn the language, let's just speak this language. And they're like, no, we're not going to waste our time. Let us speak English.
Yeah. In high school, we had
and probably the only Spanish phrases that I have are not the kind of thing you can say out loud to such a gentle audience.
Yeah, in high school.
Oh, that's cool. I think you're right. It is everyone defaults to English, and that makes it difficult as well. Yeah.
Yeah, in high school, I just took
difficult and easy at the same time.
Yeah,
too easy. It's too easy.
It was like
to speak English.
I just took there was French and Spanish, and that was it. And yeah, my wife is a Spanish major, but I know very little. I took a 102 course before I took a 101 course, and that was not a good idea. So my plan is actually to get back. My plan was this year to get back, but now with COVID, maybe 2021, not 2026, plans will be to learn and go back to a 101 course, because it would be once we start traveling, she can speak all the Spanish all the time, right? She studied in Argentina, and she spent a lot of time in Valencia in Spain. And we go and visit our friends there all the time. I haven't been to Argentina yet. It's on my list. She just so many wonderful things about it. So it's on our list. But I want to come learn Spanish before I go, because at least some basics, right? So that's my goal.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Actually, I do have a question I'm personally interested in. So we have all this new stuff coming up. We have Maui, we have .NET 5, .NET 6 right after. So I'm wondering about your own experiences, So what has changed, or what is changing maybe now that you're becoming part of the .NET ecosystem, like a very first class citizen? So how is it changing for you?
I'm a manager.
You should go first.
I'm a manager now, so there's that. I manage 5 people. I think that. I've been a long time Xamarin developer. I always felt like I thought that after we joined Microsoft, I felt really close to the .NET team and felt pretty integrated. But we've always sort of, from a community aspect, done our own kind of thing. And that kind of, I think me coming from Xamarin in the evangelism team, we were a startup, so we kind of continued that trajectory. And over the last few years, we've sort of integrated deeper into like the .NET marketing with .NET Conf, like with the Twitch channels and all the sort of advocacy that we do. And I think from my perspective of advocacy and community, you'll start to see, instead of like, hey, we have like the .NET stuff and the Xamarin stuff, like hopefully it's just one big mesh between developers that are Blazor, ASP.NET, Xamarin, whatever tech on the front end they're using. It won't really matter as much as we all just consider ourselves .NET developers. And hopefully there's still monkeys everywhere, but that's the only goal I have. That's my main goal as a manager, is to make sure there's monkeys.
I would say the main difference that I've experienced as we've kind of made this, and it is a positioning thing, right? Like James was saying, we really always kind of have been part of .NET, but to roll more of our public-facing things into .NET as a brand has kind of repositioned us. And so, for example, when we first opened up the Maui repository on the .NET org, right? So we've been living in our Xamarin org, and we all know each other for the most part. We've been doing this for like a decade or so, and we have a good community there. We know what our culture is. And then when we moved into the .NET org and we opened up that Maui repository, suddenly tons of other people came in and were looking at and commenting on, and it was a different vibe. We almost have to reestablish our credibility in some ways personally. You know, people don't know who I am. They don't know what my intentions are. They don't know what I care about, and they don't trust me. And that's fair because they don't know me. Whereas in the Xamarin community, most of you know me. You've heard me speak before. I'm pretty transparent. I try to be transparent and share how we think about things, how we talk to customers, where we're making decisions from, where our data comes from. But when we're in the .NET org with the larger audience of people who've been doing .NET development outside of Xamarin and have never really even touched Xamarin for years and years, it's a whole other ballgame. To the point where we have, more strict rules on, we really enforce the .NET code of conduct and things like that, because we want to have healthy conversations that, because I think everybody here probably knows this, right? There's a huge cultural difference between Xamarin and the Windows kind of Microsoft-centric .NET space, right? Like if you've only ever built for Windows and Microsoft as an ecosystem, it's very different than those of us who spent most of our time using .NET, but in the Apple, Google ecosystems, right? Like we think about things differently, we see things differently, and so that's the main difference I've seen. But just to wrap this up, the awesome part is that because we are now kind of integrated into .NET, if not just in position, but also working much more closely with Rich Lander and Emo Landworth and so many others, Scott Hunter, and just the Blazor team, the ASP.NET team, Dan Roth and Steve Sanderson and Alon Lipton and all these guys, wonderful teammates. There's a lot more collaboration happening, and I think that's going to pay off in terms of you'll see cool new products coming out from us as a .NET team, because there's going to be a lot more collaboration between our products. Maddy, how about you?
I don't know what to add. I mean, I think those are all really good answers.
It's not a competition.
I came in. I joined Xamarin 2 years ago, so we were still feeling more integrated with .NET. Like when I joined Microsoft and the company, people were like, "You're part of .NET." I was like, "Okay, I believe you." But over the past few years, the biggest change I've seen is like when we go to make demos, when we work with other teams, like people want to integrate mobile and desktop and all these things together all the time. So I remember James was doing a Signal R workshop. I was like, "Cool, Azure." And then a couple months later, someone was doing something, I can't even remember, but with kind of across the .NET spectrum. So it was like an IoT, but it also had Xamarin and all these great things. So that to me was really cool to really leverage the full capabilities of the platform.
Cool.
Great. Well, I have another question here. is what do you think about dual screen devices like Surface Duo? Is something that is worth looking at?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. Just
so-
leave it there. Yeah.
No, I think so. Yeah, I'm very excited about the Duo, and as soon as I get a chance to drop some money on one, I will, because it's one of those things where it may seem like a subtle shift. Okay, it's just a bigger screen, but it's different than what you've seen from the Samsung Fold, for example, which is a great device. It's a beautiful device, but really, it's kind of just expanding one screen. It's still just one experience. When you have that separation and you now have two screens, it's similar to going from one desktop screen to having two desktop screens, right? Now you use them differently. You could treat it as one large screen, but when you think about it in terms of, okay, I'm going to do this work over here, I'm going to do this work over here, you start to interact with your device differently. So from a user standpoint, those are the reasons that I'm interested in the Duo. I've kind of experienced that a little bit in just building some of the demos that we've built, working with teammates on that stuff. You know, I don't build all these things by myself. It's a team effort. But I've really experienced that. It's been cool. And anything that is kind of a paradigm shift type device or experience, that always interests me because it's very creative. It kind of makes you do things that you wouldn't normally have done. You know, in terms of what it means for the Xamarin as a product and for .NET, I think it's just another wonderful opportunity to demonstrate how flexible and powerful our products are. From Xamarin Android being able to light up the ability to do Android development from day one, to Xamarin.Forms with no additional code being able to just handle two screens. It was really, really impressive that our layout system was that flexible, that a custom layout was able to do everything it needed to do, that our navigation system was able to do everything it needed to do. And then from that point on, you're just kind of making things easier and better. And that's a great place to be in from a framework, right? You're not playing catch up just to support a feature, but you're actually saying, okay, we can support the feature, no problem. It's a brand new paradigm. And now we can just make it easier and better and make a better developer experience. So I've held them in my hands. And I've probably said this a ton of times because I am a pretty tactile person. You know, I like good, well-built stuff. And it was a very nice piece of hardware. So I would be very proud to carry that thing around, show it in public when we're allowed to, and not be ashamed at all. It's kind of like it's in the other room. I've got an old Nokia 1020. You know, the one with the big camera on the back of it, the Windows phone.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Those Nokia devices, you just kind of wanted to hold it and rub it on your face and just be like, oh, this is beautiful. They were really nice, still are very nice, well-built things. And for me, the Duo is that. The Surface team has done a wonderful job building a really cool piece of hardware that I would be proud to show to anybody.
I think, Maddy, you're the last Android user on the PM team, so
I am. Proud Android user. I was actually out on dual screen because I have like long hands, but they're not very big. So I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to hold this phone comfortably until I was trying to watch my DoorDash driver on the map deliver my food while also play a game on my phone the other day. And since then, I have been so sold on dual screen. Like, I need it. Matthew, I will stay strong. I'm Android ride or die. It's so good.
Yeah, I will say, like, on my I got the new SE Gen 2 to test out iOS. It's my first time, and I think it's good to experience both OSs. I've always said that, and now I'm trying to get myself a little bit closer into that ethos. But I will say I do miss a lot of features from Android. Like they each have their own unique quirks, but there's, like, for example, I was listening to music, and on Android, I always just like close out all my apps. And then on my iPhone, I 20 times yesterday, I was on a walk and I close all my apps on my iPhone and then the music stops. I'm like, what just happened? Right. I was like, you know, so I think that there's some advantage to it running Android, which is it's built for this form factor and can do some really crazy stuff. So I'm excited for that. And you know, I'm on a dual screen setup. I think most of us are on dual screen setups at work often. And that's how I'm streaming right now. I have this over. I mean, so it makes a lot of sense. So I'm pretty excited for that. Yeah.
Right. Cool. So we had one question here from the colleague, and it's quite interesting actually, because so it is basically say you have any customer, and why would they go for Xamarin, how can he sell Xamarin if in a year from now they'll need to migrate to Maui? How does it go?
That's really easy. It's Xamarin is evolving into .NET MAUI. So you can really think of it as Xamarin.Forms 6 in many ways. But we're also going to be taking a couple other we're adding new experiences to the mix, right? So any investment you make in Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms today, going into .NET 6, it will be as smooth of a transition as you could hope for. We'll provide tooling to do the namespace changes, the SDK style project changes for the CS proj. It's no more painful than going from packages config to CS proj, hopefully. And so we have a year plus to smooth that way through. And all of your code, you're not going to have to rewrite your code. You don't have to rewrite your apps. It all just will work. And you'll just adopt the new changes as you desire. So we'll try to make sure that everything that can be is opt-in for a period of time until you decide that you want to just make it the default, and then we'll opt out. So some of the key changes for Xamarin.Forms developers will be how you can benefit from the new renderer architecture, which I've been calling the slim renderers. The main difference being that it uses a property mapper, and so to extend any control, you'll never have to write another platform effect or platform specific or a custom renderer. You can write custom renderers if you want to, but for doing simple things or really even robust things, you can use the property mapper. And I've got a presentation that I'm starting to work on right now that will spell out as simply as I possibly can what this property mapper looks like. You can kind of get a taste for it if you look at James Clancy's Comet experiment, but I have no hesitation whatsoever telling customers, invest in Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms projects today. If you're starting a new project, start it in Xamarin.Forms. Don't wait for the first preview of .NET MAUI. And you'll have a migration path. It'll be as smooth as possible. It won't be a rewrite in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, do it.
That's very cool. Yeah, and to make to make it more difficult, what about Windows? What if I use Xamarin.Forms but I'm targeting Windows? So say EWP. What's the story there?
What's the story for Windows moving into .NET MAUI? Is that the question?
So say a heavy Windows, Xamarin.Forms and app that targets EWP, and then how's that going to look like for MAUI?
Right. So I think a really great way to think about this is how Xamarin.Forms has existed over the past 6 years. How many versions of iOS have you seen come and go? One a year, right? How about Android? And the same thing goes for Windows. If you consider what we started with on Windows, we had WinRT, we had Windows Phone support, we had UWP support. There were all these layers in there. And then as Windows Phone went away, we were able to continue on with what we have for UWP. And then the community, I think we had like 3 different implementations of WPF offered to the project, and we ended up taking the one from Mohammed. That is the current WPF implementation. So my point being that no matter what happens on the platforms, if they change radically, if WinUI, for example, is the planned migration path for UWP apps. Right. The UWP runtime will still be there in terms of the sandbox and the deployment options, the packaging. But then there's also Project Reunion and all the things to unify so that you can deploy, develop one app for Windows and ship it so that it runs on any of those target Windows devices, right? From the MAUI standpoint and from the Xamarin.Forms standpoint too, no matter what happens down here in terms of what Windows is asking developers to do, your MAUI app will continue to run fine. And so we know what the path for Xamarin.Forms and .NET MAUI looks like to take our renderers from UWP to WinUI 3. It's a pretty straightforward change. It's not too different than what we did with Windows Phone and UWP at the same time. It's not a whole new backend for us. So I think this is why I like to call Xamarin.Forms future-proof. Because if your code, as much of your code as possible, is in that Xamarin.Forms cross-platform layer, then you just plug in the different platforms and the platform implementations that you need. If that implementation is UWP, if it's WPF, if it's WinUI3, all those things are good to go. Now, we're working closely and we're talking to Paul Gusmarino and Ryan Demopoulos and the WinUI3 team to understand where they are in terms of coming to general availability, stable release. They're still in their preview cycle, as well as feature parity with the Windows platform as we support it today in Xamarin.Forms. And so when they're ready to go and they're GA, then we'll look at what our Windows developers are asking for and needing, and we'll make that transition also. So we want to support the Windows team and Windows developers in general. Wherever you need to be and whatever you need to do, we want to make sure that we support that. James.
I look at it a little bit like, if you look at Apple development, you have just creating things in natural Swift or Objective-C or using Swift UI as your front end, right? I sort of look at it as, even Apple is saying like Swift UI is great if you're an Apple developer building cross-platform apps for Apple devices, right? And that's sort of the best of what .NET offers, whether you're like, hey, I'm just going to build a UWP app just for Windows Desktop, or I'm just going to build an Android app over here, right? And you get to make the decision. What are your needs for your application? Not every app needs to be a cross-platform app. Like, that's just a true statement. Not all of them. Some of them needs crazy deep integrations. They're doing ridiculous stuff, right? I worked for Canon, or we were doing crazy processing and doing multi-GPU, CPU ridiculousness, right? And that makes sense for us to do more things at the core level. That was decades ago at this point. But I think that's one of the advantages. But I think really the messages that I hear from Scott Hunter and from Maddy is consistency. So when you think of like the hot tools, the idea is like, hey, whether you're building a UWP app or a Xamarin app or a Xamarin.Forms app, there's consistency. And I'm sure Maddy can talk to that as well in further detail.
Yeah, something we've been looking at kind of across the board with Xamarin, and Hot Reload's a really good example of this, is how to make sure that when you're writing a MAUI app, when you're targeting desktop and mobile and whatever else, and then you go into a different type of .NET project, the tooling is familiar. Or if you're switching from a Windows project or an existing Xamarin.Forms project into kind of this MAUI project, even if it's just a single project now, we want to make sure the tooling feels right. And I saw in the chat, UWP Hot Reload is absolutely one of the big things, or I guess XAML Hot Reload for Xamarin.Forms UWP. UWP itself has Hot Reload, so does WPF. But we've actually been working with that team to implement it, which is why it came behind. It's not the same debugger, right? Mono is what Xamarin uses. UWP uses Core CLR. And so we had to basically like re-architect the entire Hot Reload solution we built to hook into their debugger. And now that we're looking at kind of bringing Mono and .NET and the kind of .NET Core closer together, we're hoping to actually use this as a guideline to help us merge these experiences ahead of time instead of retroactively having to go back and be like, oh no, we didn't even think about this. Let's fix it now. But it's cool. Going back to that kind of first question. It's been a really good way to get more familiar with the .NET team and what else is going on in the Visual Studio teams.
Great. Well, I have a question here in the chat that says that how is the camera support for Xamarin Essentials? Is that coming soon or after MAUI? And then I have an additional question there, that how is going to work Xamarin Essentials? Because it is going to be integrated in system devices, but it is going to be a package? How is it going to be?
Yeah, good question. So we've been working really close with the .NET library, the core CoreFX team, and sort of just the BCL team, I should say. Sorry, the BCL team really closely, and the API design review team. So Xamarin Essentials, right? The whole goal of abstracting platform APIs was birthed from the amazing work that the community did, collaborating with the community to bring things together. Jonathan Dick and Matthew Leibowitz as the lead engineers on the project were spectacular, working with the community and members. Many probably are watching or in the chat room. Many that I know to see the names have worked on some great libraries. Xamarin Essentials, the idea is as .NET evolves into a single .NET, and it's just the type of UI framework, there shouldn't really be like yet another package. Like the name Xamarin Essentials, it's not just for Xamarin. And in fact, Xamarin Essentials works on Tizen, it works on Mac OS. People are working on WPF support. They're working on everything, right? So it feels just like how, system.maui, like in the system namespace, is really just that extension for system.devices or whatever we come up with. That's not 100% final, but I'm pretty sure it'll be something like that. So what we sort of worked with is that, there's already a lot of APIs that are in the BCL, like the networking APIs, like system info and versioning, but they just didn't work correct for iOS and Android. So we're working with the BCL team. So Jonathan Dick and Matt Leibowitz and the Essentials team, they're working with the BCL team to say, well, we don't need this other API. Let's fix the API that already exists in .NET. So really, what you'll see with .NET 6 is that a bunch of the APIs, not a bunch, but quite a few of the APIs that existed in Xamarin Essentials, like this device information, the screen information, different information, those already exist in the BCL. So why have two APIs? It'll just be one and it'll do the right thing, which is awesome. And then going forward, the API design team, like Emo and the BCL team, they do API reviews on GitHub. You'll start seeing basically system.devices roll into that. Like, how does it work? How does it scale to like a Raspberry Pi device or IoT devices or things like that? So I think that you'll just see more integration there. And hopefully for most developers, if you're transitioning, it'll just be like a namespace change, and hopefully that's it, and we're going to make sure that things are really consistent. On camera, I don't know yet. I think we need to decide if that is a UI feature or not a UI feature or not. After taking Xamarin.mobile and making the media plugin, I learned that cameras are hard. It's like I was like background geolocation, hard, payments, terrible. So I mean, there's some things that we want to do. So hopefully at some point it'll just roll in, but I think we need to figure out what's the right way to do it. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we had WWDC a few weeks ago already, and Apple announced quite a lot of new stuff. So we have a few questions in the chat about it. So what does ARM support looks like from the MAUI standing point? And so, yeah, generally, how do you feel? What does everything that was announced in WWDC, what does it mean for Xamarin?
Everything. I'll talk to the SDK related things, and then Maddy, you could talk to Apple Silicon and ARM. Does that sound good? So from the UI standpoint, there are really only a few changes in UIKit, which is the high priority thing for us to make sure that we deliver, right? That's what your apps depend on to be able to ship UI on iOS. So there's really just a few changes there. There's a new inline picker. You can start using switch as a checkbox, which is in UIKit, but that only works when you're shipping through Catalyst to macOS. So that's an interesting one. But really, there's not a whole lot of ton new stuff. There's a new color picker, I think, that works on iPadOS, and things like that. So some of the bigger announcements that are UI or phone related would be Widget Kit and App Clips. So Widget Kit is the ability for you to have, and I've got iOS 14 here. Everybody else probably already has this, right? So you can have some big old widgets up on your iOS screen. So I've got my music widget there with Kaleo. Anybody listen to Kaleo? Yeah, good stuff right there. So the thing about that is you need to use Swift UI to build that. And we do not at this time have a Swift UI binding support. So we are considering how to best approach delivering something like Widget Kit. First of all, widgets in general and extensions, today extensions and things like that. While they are very cool and marketing loves to announce them at WWDC, we don't see very big usage of those things within any ecosystem, whether it's Google's, they have some similar concepts to all these things, or iOS, whether you're using native or you're using C# and .NET. So we have to look very closely at what is the investment on those things versus the value and the return. And so the way we're thinking about it right now, and we have a little prototype. So I can't show you the prototype right now, but I will just tell you about it because you're the closest friends that we have in this particular moment in this time right now. So we have a prototype where you can build a widget kit using Swift UI, using Swift, and then we will bundle it together using MS Build into your Xamarin iOS application.
Love it.
So this gives you the ability without any roadblocks to do it today. And we'll be, so that's
I see the chat's freaking out.
Yeah, are they freaking out?
At least a few people in my chat were like, by the way, this is exactly how like React Native and Flutter work for like doing that stuff. And I proposed to David a long time ago. I'm sure that wasn't the first proposal. I was like, what if we just did this? And this is the first time I'm hearing it. So
that's the first time you heard it? Yeah. So I've seen it work and it's really great. And then we that's also cool. Have we've written a little library to do some messaging back and forth from Swift UI widget kit to your Xamarin iOS app. Because we're asking the question, okay, if you've got this widget, what does it need to know from the app? And so it's not too dissimilar from what you would have done in the early days of building a watchOS app, if you'd ever done that. Like you couldn't read directly from your main app stuff in the early days. It was all message passing. So that's consideration. That's something that we could do. And then we go to the other end of the extreme. We could do the full binding to Swift UI. However, that's got its own serious complications. Swift, everybody probably remembers Swift-O-Matic, which still exists. It's called Binding Tools for Swift. And we're able to bind quite a few libraries, but there are some nuances to the Swift language that just makes it really, really hard. It's like there's a huge diminishing return in terms of what you can do. So with WidgetKit, that's where we're thinking right now, and we may continue down that path, but we're holding out also the option to deliver a full C# Swift UI binding. Then App Clips is the ability to have a really small version of your app that somebody can snap a QR code or I guess use RFID or some kind of proximity thing, and it will immediately load that. You can think of it like for bike share, or over here with the COVID-19 pandemic, stay at home. We don't stay at home in America. We go out to restaurants still because that's how we roll. Sorry.
Not me. I haven't been to a restaurant in 4 months.
So I live in the Midwest, okay?
No excuse, David. Face mask on.
No face masks are on, but we still go to a restaurant. So they don't give you menus though. You snap a QR code.
Oh, I see.
Maddie's
takeout only.
You're blurry, Maddie.
Takeout only. Lots of takeout.
Takeout only. Yeah, takeout only. What is your problem, David?
So as Brian is noting in the chat, stay focused, y'all. There is a 10 megabyte limit. And so is that too small for a Xamarin app? A Xamarin.Forms Hello World app is 9.5 megabytes. So that only leaves you with half a megabyte to fit in any custom work. Now, with .NET MAUI, we're certainly going to try to get that down quite a bit. But that's where we are today. So Xamarin iOS, you're a little bit better off. Xamarin iOS Hello World release build for particular ARM architecture is around 6 megabytes. So you've got a little bit more room to work with there. So this may be another case of where we say Swift is your best option, or just do it that way, and we'll work to bundle that together with your primary Xamarin iOS application. So we're considering what the best options are there as well. Then I guess the last major announcement at WWDC that is SDK related would be Catalyst. So Catalyst is the ability to deploy your iOS application to the macOS desktop. And this is very cool if you've never done this before. If you have any interest whatsoever in just taking your existing iOS applications to the Mac, to the desktop, this is a great way to do it. It's very low friction. It works by default. But the main consideration here being that there is a lot of effort to the build tooling system, because really it's a whole new architecture. to deploy to. It's not just, oh, it's Mac OS, so therefore you know what to do. It's Mac OS with a twist. And so you have to build the whole, yeah, there's the mask. There you go. I've got masks.
Mask on, David. Mask on.
I got my
mask
cool,
on.
I got this one. This one's awesome. I can breathe through this one.
I rode my bike yesterday with this one.
We wear masks.
Good.
You just don't wear them at the restaurant when you're 6 plus.
You can't put the food through it?
It's hard. It's hard to stick the food through the mask.
Try harder.
What was I saying? All right. I was talking about Catalyst. All right. So the architecture, being able to debug, people might want to be able to debug that iOS app when it's on the Mac OS desktop. That's not something that just works. So that there's quite a bit to it. It's more complicated than it looks. If you go over to Xcode and you're like, hey, it's just a checkbox. You just check the Catalyst box and it just works. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes there. But we know that that's in high demand. It certainly is what most developers have told us that they're eager to be able to use. So we're going to try to find an availability as soon as possible to get the bare minimum working and see what the traction is to make that into a product.
I love that. I love this short answer from you, David.
I'm sorry. There's no short answers to these things. These are all complicated things.
And don't forget about ARM. Best part.
And so there's this thing called Apple Silicon, which Maddy is now going to tell you all about.
Yeah. First of all, Apple Silicon, I'm so mad that they have branded that because it's the only thing I can call it now, even though it's just an ARM processor. Not just, it's still good. But if you saw the announcement, you saw that they are going to start launching MacBooks with the ARM with Apple Silicon by the end of the year, and they're going to keep Intel available. So we don't actually know what devices they're going to start launching ARM, what devices are going to start launching Intel. They might keep, like the new Mac, the cheese grater Mac. They might keep that Intel. They might not. They might make Mac Minis ARM. They might not. We have no idea. But we have a whole list of things that we have to consider making sure run on ARM and then bring over. And there's also the other spectrum of it has to work on the new Mac OS, it has to work with the new Xcode, and it has to work with the new iOS. So those things we do anyways. Those things we are always doing. But when it comes to ARM, we also have to make sure that Mono is going to run on ARM, that Visual Studio for Mac, which is built on Mono and Mono Develop, is going to run on ARM, that all of our tooling is going to build properly. There's probably some questions on how Android is going to work on ARM and how we're going to use Android emulators when there isn't Hyper-V with Intel. It's a whole lot of questions. And then we also have our paradigmatic experience, like what happens there. There's a lot of things going on. But
with work ahead.
Yeah, yes, a lot of work ahead. But we're kind of learning with all of you, and we don't know what's important. And also, it's definitely going to be affected by if the development machines stay Intel, right? We might have less pressure to start pulling things over sooner rather than later. But if they are like, hey, our developer machines are all going to be ARM, that's going to really force us to start prioritizing that over any of the other things we have going on.
Yeah, I think I got my DTK right here. So I've been playing around with it. It's extremely impressive. I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about or not about, but I do have one. It's sitting here. I'm Frank and I, we both have one, and I'm extremely impressed. I'll say this though. Everything that David and Maddy just really described is like, here's a bucket of stuff that needs to be prioritized based on what's important to developers, right? You only have so many hours in a day with so many developers that work on the .NET team, on the Xamarin team, and the tooling team. And you have to look at demand from you, all of you listening and tuned in is what is the most important, right? I'm pretty sure if you can't build and ship your application on a platform, that may be a little bit more important than an app clip. An app clip, just like instant apps that nobody used from Google, right? And Android, right? They're used, but by a very small percentage of people for very granular things. So I think, you had the pre-Microsoft Xamarin days, which is like, let's just do everything under the sun. We'll just put everything all together. And you could totally do that, but is everything going to be great? So what you really need to do is prioritize that based on how do you make this a spectacular experience for developers, and that's going to meet their business requirements. Because if you have 5 billion people, like if you have 98% of our developers asking for Catalyst support, and you only have 1% of the developers asking for app clip supports, app clip might be the marketing buzz, but really it makes more sense to do this work. So I think that's really how the team is focused too, by the way. So like looking forward at these new things, it is a lot of work, but it also means that they're prioritize things based on customer demand. And I think Pierce and Maddy have talked about that a lot on a lot of the presentations and keynotes and how things have changed since coming into Microsoft and some of the customer driven development that we do. That's all I got.
Perfect.
Great. There was one question related with Blazor that it was about Blazor data bindings, if it is a wish or is a reality.
It's an experiment.
It's an experiment.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good way to say it.
Well, not all of us work closely with Alon, and he's doing a bunch of work with like Steve, and there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming out of it. That I think just watch it, and just there's going to be, experiments often turn into sometimes products or features of products, and I don't know. You never know. But I think what's cool is that if you were a Blazor developer and you didn't want to go write a bunch of XAML, this is a great opportunity for you to try out something really cool, right?
Yeah, and I will say this about Blazor, and Comet is another great example of this, Blazor bindings and Comet. Yeah, even if they don't end up becoming their own products, there are learnings from those things. We learn things that come back into the other products. Mm-hmm. So there are changes that we have made or we are making to Xamarin.Forms and to .NET MAUI that directly benefit the ability to do things like Comet and Blazor mobile bindings. So
yeah,
the wins, the knowledge, the experiment, the value from those things lives on, even if it doesn't become its own thing.
I think a lot of time in the tooling, right? I always get constant stuff from Maddy all the time, showing me cool, crazy stuff. I think a lot of that comes from some of those experiments. Unless I'm wrong, Maddy.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Right.
Well.
So we had one question. I heard that public control is getting closer to the finish line. Will we see it in Xamarin.Forms, or is it going to be a surprise in MAUI? I guess it's definitely not going to be a surprise. But
yeah, it's not going to be a surprise. It's there. There's the PR, and I know that it is getting closer. So we'll do our level best to get this into Xamarin.Forms 5, because this PR has been around for a bit. Really anything that was in as a contribution from a feature standpoint before Wednesday of this week, we're going to do everything we can to get those in. We're not going to, force anything in. But if it's ready and it's good and it belongs in Xamarin.Forms 5, we'll do our best, because the contributors put the effort in, right? And we don't want to turn that away. If it doesn't make it into Xamarin.Forms, then for sure it has every opportunity to be transitioned to .NET MAUI. And it can be as simple, depending on what it is, can be as simple as just moving the PR over. It might require a little bit of rework because of the way the renderers are changing. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with all the PRs. And so it seems like this one is getting closer. And if it's in good enough shape in time, we'll do that. The main reason being is we need to give our team and all of our contributors the room to do the work to get to .NET MAUI. If we just keep taking PRs, and we'll never get there.
Right. Okay. I do have a question about, so we had this .NET 6, .NET 5 to .NET 6 web, and so I get from there that some things might be ready before .NET 6, might come as previews. So what about Visual Studio Code support?
Yes, so we're definitely very excited about that. I can give my answer, but Maddy, you haven't spoken in a while. Do you want to be on the hot seat for the VS Code question?
I have a non-answer, which is we don't know. I think, yeah, I mean, right now our VS Code story is purely based on the MVU side of things, just because there's not really any XAML support in VS Code right now. And that's work that has to be done kind of at the .NET or the Visual Studio or the XAML level, right? That's not really work that we can do easily as the Xamarin team, but it's something we're talking about. That being said, like the Comet experiment, part of James Clancy's work with that was that he made a VS Code extension. And I have not gotten it to work on Windows, but I have gotten it to work very well on Mac. So if you want to try it out and get a feel for what that experience might be like and give feedback, Comment is probably a really good place to start and try it out. Then you can give that feedback on the .NET MAUI repo. The more we get people saying that they want VS Code, the higher in priority it's going to be.
Yeah, it's just kind of like the same thing, right? There's like all the things that you both and Hunter announced at Build, and it's like there's a bunch of things, right? And those will come in a list. So with .NET 6 preview, like so the .NET ships every year in November, and at the same time that a new version of .NET ships and a preview comes along close after that. So like when a .NET 6 preview ships, then you naturally get like a .NET 6 MAUI-esque preview of sorts, right? Not to put timelines on it because there's not like a date that we're announcing like you can get the bits today, right? But you should probably follow the .NET blog. So unless David has other more direct thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that you're going to see in terms of VS Code is us with our prototypes and say, okay, we've shown you that we've got some things working. You saw it at Build. That was all real. And so what is that going to look like moving forward? We're going to be doing some customer experiments to understand what level of VS Code support makes the MAUI experience a delight, and what is really necessary. We hear a lot from native developers, client app developers, that the full integrated IDE experience is more beneficial for debugging and troubleshooting and native stack traces and things like that. So do those things need to exist in VS Code, or are we good with just what we have? I will say, in addition to experiencing what Maddy just shared for Comet, you can also use Live Sharp, and you can pair that up with a VS Code experience because it's just using a file watcher, and it'll watch your files as you're changing them, and it'll update your app, both XAML and C#. And there's some configuration that you do there. So if you want to get a flavor for that, that's something you can do today. But like Maddy said, yeah, the XAML stuff, that's a whole bucket of work to get that experience good, if not great, in VS Code. So the first thing you'll probably see from us is the experiments and the customer findings and things that we can get into your hands. But committing to it as a full product is where we're hedging and saying, until we know that the customer demand and support is there for it, we won't announce it as a product.
Yeah, I think that, I was watching a lot of the .NET Foundation interviews yesterday and today and for the board of directors. And what I kept hearing this recurring theme about .NET was education and getting started is very complicated, right? Because like a lot of people can't understand what is .NET or compared to other languages and other things. I think imagine, you're a high school student or, a college kid and you go in and you're used to your normal flow like web developers, right? Like they all learn command line and VS Code and Sublime and things like that. But now you can go and you can say .NET New and you get your mobile applications. You can open up this lightweight code editor and you can get some experiences that are there, right? And when you look at other experiences like Flutter or React Native, there's a combination of different experiences that are there today between VS Code, Sublime, or Android Studio, or things like that. So that hybrid model of this is going to work really well for the type of developer that's going to use this for this is really exciting. Because I could imagine going into a classroom in 10 years, whenever we're allowed back in classrooms, and I can do .NET New, and I can have everyone really install this really lightweight. It's very slim to get started, and they could always upgrade to a full IDE necessary, and the same things work. And I think that's quite exciting. So based on, I'm not a command line person. I just don't get it. But there's a lot of people that are. So I think that unlocking those scenarios hopefully will attract a lot of new developers that are there. But like if you already love Visual Studio, like maybe you'll do some editing in VS Code, but maybe it's not your full experience every day. So balancing those is exciting, I think, in general, to bring new developers in.
Great. I have a personal question. It is related because last year we had in Xamarin Assemble Daniel Casurino as a speaker. Have you worked with the Argentinian team? Maybe the people doesn't know that there is or there was an Xamarin office in Buenos Aires, Argentina. We don't really know what is going to happen with that office. Do you know?
I still work with them every day. So some of them, oh, my dog is barking. He's mad at me paying attention to someone besides him. A couple people, so Daniel Casalino, Kazoo, we call him, a couple people moved to go work on some of the Visual Studio Online initiatives, which is really cool. But Victor, who is kind of the manager of that team when they came into Xamarin, still works with us. I talk to him like almost every day. And there's still a whole team of people down there. They're actually the team that did Hot Restart. So if you've used Hot Restart, that's their work. And they're also the team that handles almost all of just like the, what I call make it work Xamarin stuff. Like, oh, it builds. Oh, that's good. That's in Argentina. Sorry, I meant my dog, not my daughter. I don't have a dog. I do have a dog, and he's my son, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, the Argentina team is great, and we work with them all the time.
There you go.
Great.
That's pretty cool. All right, so I think we're pretty much on time, even though we started a couple minutes later. So I think for everyone that's here in this session, there's one upcoming session starting like in a couple seconds if you want to jump into that. And yeah, so it's up to you guys, if you want to stay here for a couple more questions, or I'm not sure actually what your schedules look like, also because it's Friday. Because in the name of Xamarin Assemble, I would first like to say thank you very much for being part of this event. We're really happy and we're really honored to have you here. So thank you.
Well, we'll definitely do it in person next time, right? I was planning on having a whole South American tour this year, but that didn't work out.
Next year.
Thank you so much for having us.
Maybe next year.
Yeah,
A
thanks for
great
having
event.
us.
I'm going to drop because I am hungry and I'm going to get cranky soon. But feel free to tweet me or email me. It's Maddy@Microsoft.com. Maddy Leger 1 anytime. And I am more than happy to answer your questions if I see them and know the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick around and try to watch some of the other sessions. I mean, the next session is making beer with Xamarin.Forms, right? So I really don't see how you missed this.
Yes, I am
true.
sticking around. All right. I will see you all.
Good call. Well, thanks everyone.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Ciao. Hasta
Thanks.
luego.
See you guys. Ciao.